intro music. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is time once again for Hangin' at the Rafters, episode 2. Good to see you here. And tonight, we have a very special show. Now, we're still working out some of the kinks in this whole thing. So forgive us some of the mistakes that you'll see along the way. One of which is I made this sign to put on the desk tonight. As you can see, it's backwards, and I didn't know it worked that way. So I'll read it to you. This is set up so that, as you know, Rafters Tavern has had difficult times as a result of this pandemic, the same as almost all businesses and people have done throughout America. And so we're putting on this show to entertain you and also to keep the name out there. And if you are so inclined to donate for the entertainment value that you will get tonight, you may do so by going to www.venmo, that's venmo.com/Rafters-Tavern. Once again, that's www.venmo.com/Rafters-Tavern. Obviously, you're under no obligation to do that, but if you're so inclined and the spirit hits you, then that would be great. I also want to put in a plug for this entire town. Callicoon is a magical place. We have a lot of great businesses here. It's a great place to visit. You got the Delaware River right over there. We have, hopefully it'll open soon, we have the Callicoon movie theater, which is fantastic. Best popcorn around. And we have Peppino's Italian eatery. We have the Western Supper Club. We have the brewery. We have the wine merchant over there who's doing tapas. There's a lot of great places to visit. So pop on up to Callicoon when you get a chance. Now I'm going to head over to my desk. There we go. Look at that. I feel very official now. Now, tonight's show, we have a very special guest, as I told you before. This particular songwriter and performer is one of the absolute best in the area. Last episode, we have Elizabeth Rose, who is absolutely fantastic, and we continue this quality with our next guest. His songwriting is so rich with imagery that it will blow you away. He's a fantastic individual. Please give a big round of applause to Lucas Maihara Rotman.
Hey, Brewster Smith.
Once again, I just point out
you here.
Fancy meeting you here. And I should point out, yes, we don't have masks on, but for this particular show, we have a very large sheet of plastic between us right here. So it is all very, very safe. I was also told that my applause machine doesn't sound like applause at all. Somebody says it sounds like popcorn, and my laugh track also doesn't sound like laughter. It sounds like a flushing toilet from what I hear. So that's unfortunate, but if the occasion arises, I can do sounds like this. I don't know for what reason I would have to use that, but I have that. So Lucas,
Welcome to Hangin from the Rafters. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right. I could kind of see your image through here.
You don't want to see me any clearer than that.
Oh, don't say that.
I'm
Don't
sure.
say that.
I'm sure you don't want to see me any clearer than that. So,
By the way, the school desk, looks circa 1949, maybe.
Oh, yes.
It's like looking seriously old school.
it is literally old school. Now, the thing is if you saw episode 1, I had a different chair, which I sunk into and disappeared. It was very comfortable for me, but not much to see, I'm sure. So instead, I have this very hard and uncomfortable wooden chair for your enjoyment, and this old school desk.
Gotta keep those kiddies awake.
That's right. So I mentioned, first of all, I wanted to ask you, I pronounced your middle name correctly, right? Maihara?
Maihara, yes.
Okay, so can you tell me where you got the name Maihara?
The name Maihara comes from my grandmother. Well, actually, that would come from my grandfather, the Maiharas of Hawaii, and they are still very prominent in Hawaii. Usually came from the Maui area, actually. A lot of Japanese Americans over there. I am half Japanese American on my mother's side. And so that name comes from my grandfather, Saburo Maihara.
Ah.
Yes.
Now, forgive me that I don't recall the absolute details, but
That's okay. I don't remember the absolute details of much.
Well, you
And my mom is watching, so she will correct me.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, YouTube doesn't have the ability for people to actually send messages through, so that's probably a saving
That's a good thing.
It's a good. Absolutely. But you did bring up once before your Japanese heritage, and you were doing something in that regard, weren't you? Like working with somebody?
Oh, yeah. So there's an amazing organization called Suru for Solidarity. Shout out to them. They are made up of Japanese Americans and Japanese American descendants. A lot of folks like me. A lot of what we call hoppies, which are sort of like mixed folks who are sort of like really. On the one hand, it gives us a way for the Japanese American community. The Japanese American community was really dispersed after World War II. Mm-hmm. It was hard for them to sort of maintain any kind of community, especially on the West Coast after the internment. So a lot of Japanese Americans sort of like were kind of forced. They lost all their land and everything during the internment, and they were forced to go throughout the country and in very dispersed communities. So it's been very hard for Japanese Americans to sort of maintain kind of like a cultural identity, and the cultural identity of Japanese Americans is very distinct from, say, Japanese. Right. Have a very different history, very different culture, even different culinary traditions. And so my upbringing was sort of like more in the Philadelphia area. And my family actually came more from the Hawaii area, which had a kind of a different sort of situation. So this organization is doing a lot of work sort of around sort of like the what we call the American concentration camps that are now in place along our border, where children and families are being held and in terrible conditions, and especially with coronavirus coming now, it's really scary sort of situation. And I guess for Japanese Americans, we sort of remember our own internment. We remember what happened to us when we lost our rights. And
Can I ask you, is George Takei, right? Didn't he just come out with a book, and he's been speaking about
he's been speaking. George is sort of like a hero of many of ours. He's been on this issue for a long time. He was actually interned as a child, so he actually lived. Yeah, so folks like my grandmother, my mother's folks, we weren't so much in Hawaii because the economy was so needed sort of Japanese American sort of labor. They never interned the Japanese Americans in Hawaii, except for except for people who were leaders in the community, were like my great grandfather was sort of was taken from his home at bayonet point in the middle of the night and taken to an internment camp in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So the Hawaiian story is a little bit different, but still it's made up of many Japanese Americans who are really concerned about sort of like the internment of children and families right now, and that situation. And they are sort of an activist organization trying to sort of address this. I am not a person who's been involved with them for a long time. I just sort of found out about them, and I was just starting to get involved with them, and then the pandemic hit. And I think as an organization, they are sort of regrouping, and I'm sort of out there. I'm out here, and not in the city so much right now.
Well,
so.
the pandemic certainly did put a, if not a total stop, a slowdown to a lot of things.
Right.
Now, also hearing you talk about this, I know a lot of your songs, and I know social justice runs really deep in you. I don't recall, you let me know, have you ever written a song on that subject?
Yeah, I actually have a couple. I was thinking about sort of like bringing my baritone guitar and playing a song called, I think you might remember it. It's called Letters. It was written about my mom and her sort of experience getting letters back and forth from my grandfather, who fought and died in World War II. In the all Japanese American regiment called the 442nd 100th Battalion. So there was that song, but I wasn't quite sure.
You didn't bring the guitar for that one, right?
I did not.
Well, that's okay, because I know that I saw the list of other songs that you're going to do, and there's one. What was that other one about swimming in the river?
That would be Longing No Border Contain.
Okay, could you play that one for us? Yeah, tell us a little bit about it.
Switch it around a little bit here. Get the right harmonica. So this song is called Longing No Border Contain, and it's a story it's an immigrant story, and it refers to sort of like the migrant children. I first started working on it after reading a book by Sonia Nazario, called Enrique's Journey. I think it was pretty well known during the early 2000s. And she actually took a trip with migrant children from Central America, where they were escaping poverty and war and gangs and drugs, to try to make their way through Mexico to the United States. And in many cases to try to be reunited with family that were already living here and had been living here for some time. And so she took that brutal, horrific journey with these kids and wrote a book about it. And so I assumed that that's where I got the inspiration from. But then as I sort of searched my memory a little bit, I sort of remembered that during the 80s, I had spent time in a place in Mexico City called La Casa de los Amigos, which was I guess it was a Quaker kind of meeting house place, which also sort of which housed migrants and refugees and also backpackers. So I got a chance to sort of like actually meet a lot of folks who were taking this perilous journey and who were really escaping dire conditions. And I had never really had that experience to meet refugees before. And one kid in particular had a particularly compelling story named Javier. He was able to tell me some of his story in Mexico City, and then he actually ended up in New York City, and I ended up meeting up with him, and he told me the rest of his journey. And so I think a lot of that story comes from him.
All right, so well, let's hear it.
Longing No Border Contain. You gonna play some cajon on that too?
If you would like.
rails hiss, in the distance train whistle moans. Just out of sight on his Chiapas night, grasping we pull ourselves on. Strapped to the bars between winding cars, learn as we watch us fall. When it's lit from the top, like the death in the arms of his mother. Oh, oh, swing your cuddy, your sweet lullaby in the rain. Oh, oh, swing your meaning, longing no more can take, no more can take. No more can take. Sidewalks to a drain, watching the rain drip from cracks in the wall, drifting to sleep. Picture I keep so close to my heart, rolled down on my knees so the people won't see. Now shadows slip through the pole, middle over and baptized in the cross, river tears. Burning much over our souls, we are ready. Sweet lullaby and the rain. Oh, oh, swing your meaning, no longing, no more can take, no more can take. No more can take. As the swift waters roll, we shed most of our clothes. My brother swam right by my side. I reached the land, naked he's to the bottom, where his body still lies. Oh, swing your cutting, sweet lullaby and the rain. Oh, oh, swing your meaning, no longing, no more can take, no more can take. No more can take. No more can take.
Well, that's an amazing song.
Oh, well, thank you, Brewster Smith. And thank you for playing along.
And you know what my big regret is here?
You have regrets?
Oh, I have regrets. The regret is you have such moving and touching songs and such fantastic stories. I don't feel right using any of my little funny sound effects.
But you just did what you just did, Brewster.
I did, but I have no real platform. Here it is. Okay, so that means nothing in this context.
Well, yes, but it's fun anyway.
So how many years ago did you write that song?
I probably wrote that. I probably wrote that about 10, 11 years. Yeah, 10, 11 years ago. Yeah, I think that's about right. 10, 11 years. No, longer than that. Sorry, geez, I forget about. Time has passed. No, probably more like 15 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now you're a pretty prolific songwriter, though. I mean, every time I see you, you've come up with a new song or you're working on a new song. Is that true?
I mean, I feel like I'm not maybe as much as maybe when we first met. I think like all songwriters sort of go through different phases of sort of like having sort of what we call, your dry periods. I would probably be in one of those right now. But I feel like I'm starting to write my way out of it. and things are starting to come a little bit now. But I definitely feel like it's not. I kind of remember there being, I don't know, maybe some songwriters sort of, there's probably some songwriters out there probably have some times when they just have things kind of flowing through them all the time, and just sort of like boom, boom, another song. I can't say that that's the case for me at this time period. But
I can say that as a songwriter, when I was in the most pain and suffering, when my life was in the toilet, that's when I wrote the best. That's when I wrote the best song.
So you're saying it's just because I'm too damn happy?
Yes.
No, I need to be more unhappy.
Well, here we are in the middle of a pandemic, which is a very serious thing, and I find, at least in myself, you tell me how it is for you, but as creative as I want to be in this moment, when I actually have more time to do it and enough pain and suffering to create something out of, I feel almost paralyzed, and I don't do much with it. What have you been doing?
No, that's probably. I think a lot of people are sort of like having this experience during sort of like the pandemic, which is kind of like, oh wow, I'm going to learn 7 different languages, and and I'm going to sort of like learn how to ride a unicycle, and I'm going to sort of like they sort of have these amazing, unrealistic sort of like expectations and goals, and sort of like, if I'm learning anything as a teacher, it's sort of like to really change my expectations, both for my students that I teach and for myself. I feel really lucky to sort of have an amazing, some amazing school leaders. Our principal is sort of like really kind of trying to focus us on sort of like, being kind of realistic in terms of our expectations of ourselves and of our kids. And I think that, I think that's the case too for people who are sort of artists, this expectation that suddenly you're going to sort of create the great American novel or write the next amazing song or paint the next incredible picture is not always necessarily true.
Well, you just brought up a couple of words that lead into something for me. They kind of hit home for me. You said paint a picture. Right. Now, your father was an artist, yes?
He was, yes.
Yes, and I've seen that work. It's absolutely amazing work. But you wrote a song called Portraits, specifically about your father, yes?
That I did.
And is it not true that there is a video somewhere on YouTube that you can see and hear this song, Portraits, that you're about to hear now, by Lucas Rotman, and also see the work that his father painted?
That my father did. Probably the best place to go to is I have a band website called Melodic Miners, and miners.com. And if you go there, you will see a link to my videos, and one of them I made was sort of with the music of this song and with some of my dad's artwork sort of superimposed onto it. So you can definitely see that.
Well, I think that's what I want to hear now.
All right.
Just saying. Is there anywhere that I can put some sound effects in?
You know what, Brewster? It's your show. You can put sound effects in wherever you damn well.
All right, let me find a good one. Let me find a good sound effect. Okay, here we go. This is going to be a drum roll with a cymbal crash just before this fantastic song, Portraits. Portraits by Lucas Rotman.
Well, that really set the mood. Yeah, sure did. I used to wonder why in old buildings and warehouses, crumbling remains of factories, corpses of trains, bottoms of bridges, shipyards warped beyond repair, storefront church in Kensington, Peeling benches in Norris Square. I used to wonder what all the remains and the rough, a solitude and oneness in the stroke of the brush. Skipping the neighbors' barking dogs, summer nights with beeping horns, multitude, the endless throngs, the place to belong. If I could see, if I could see through your eyes, all the days that pass us by. Through these city streets you walk, capture everything that you've lost. Try to see things as you see. Don't have your eyes, your ability. See the color, shape, the symmetry to give life to things. Only guess what brought you here. Lonely places that others fear. Was it the silence you learned to hear? Fading memories of forgotten years. If I could see, if I could see through your eyes, whoa, pass me by. Through these city streets you'd walk, capture everything that you've lost. Let's take a walk before we go back to the places we used to know. Bring your dark palette and your brushes though, where the river flows. While we sit down in the shade, paint the old refinery. You'll sing a song honoring crumbling promenade. If I could see through your eyes, all the days that passed us by. Through these city streets we'd walk, capture everything that we've lost. I could see through your eyes. Thank you, Booster.
And how long ago did you write that song?
Well, it's weird. That song was actually, I actually started working on it while he was still alive. So it was actually prior to probably 2006, 2007, when I just started to, think about my time with him and sort of like all the times that he would go off. His love was to do cityscapes, and he often sort of like disappeared into the working class neighborhoods of Philadelphia to sort of like paint pictures of storefront churches and or go along the riverfront up where Delaware Avenue is, the old abandoned sugar plant factories and things like that. And I just found those places kind of scary myself. So I often I did not go with him often enough. And I guess that song was kind of a lament for not having spent more time with him, because the times that I did go with him, I often learned a lot. So,
well, that's actually I think if there's a couple of benefits of this pandemic, that putting things in perspective, and the things that might be important, and actually giving us a little bit more time to invest in those things. I mean that's normal to happen, right? It's like when you lose somebody, wishing that you went back and
Yeah.
spent more time, or that you'd said this or said that.
Yeah, I think a lot of songs, maybe a lot of songs are sort of like that.
Yeah, a lot of, but it sounds like you said quite a bit in that song.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of interesting. The other, what was it? Last year, I guess it was. Like I held on to my dad's, I've been holding on to my dad's ashes for like forever and ever. And, finally, I think it was last summer, I finally got myself together to actually do something and, trying to figure out sort of what was a way to sort of like honor my dad. And so I tried to, it was very hard. My dad didn't catalog his work very well, he did what he did out of love. I mean, there certainly were people who did buy his paintings and who would sort of come around his studio, and he would sell them at Rittenhouse Square. They had an artist, a clothesline exhibit he would sell there. But mostly he did it because he just loved it. And was always touched if somebody would sort of like buy a painting of his, but he never charged very much for his paintings, and often, he practically sort of gave them away to friends, to family, to just people who appreciated them. Last year I sort of tried to just look at the paintings and try to figure out sort of where in Philadelphia these scenes took place. I knew a lot of the paintings came from Kensington and Fishtown because that's where he grew up, right? So I sort of like, I was able to identify some of the places, but Philadelphia is gentrified so quickly that it was often many of those places don't exist anymore.
That's great though that you could find those.
Yeah, I mean, just from looking at just from sort of like looking at it, and then I did grow up in Philadelphia, so it's not like I don't have any knowledge. But it's been a while since I've spent any time really in Philadelphia. So my mom also helped me too. She was actually she started to get involved. At first, I wasn't sure how interested she was, but once I broached the subject, she actually got really involved, and she actually picked a bunch of places that we could scatter some ashes, just in the sort of Central City area too. Where he went to school, where he used to sell his paintings. She remembered the exact spot, the tree where he used to sit down when he was waiting for customers to come by, and where he chat with people. So,
now, do you feel in any way like? I mean, I know what I think the answer is, but I want to ask you because I know
but
so much
the answer
about the in-depth workings of your mind and your family. No, it's do you feel like you've followed in his footsteps some?
I don't, it's sort of like, how many of us try to live up to our fathers, my father was really a really unique, interesting sort of a person. I would consider myself very blessed to sort of like have have half of the character that he had. So probably not, but I do sort of like to think that some of the lessons that he kind of left behind, some of the things that he valued, that other people might not necessarily value, that is definitely into my work. You've often said, you said before that, there's a lot of imagery.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking. It's that he painted with his hands, you paint with yours.
And I kind of remember, not that I had loads of conversations with him about art and process and things like that, but I do remember one of the things that really sticks with me is a conversation we had when I started doing photography, I think when I was in college. And he was really excited by that because he had an old darkroom with sort of like old equipment and things like that. And he was, he generally didn't really get into, showing me stuff like that, but he was very excited that I took an interest in it. And so he started showing me how to use the darkroom, and he had a couple old cameras that were, fairly decent that people had given him and that he'd used over the years. And so I would go out and shoot pictures with him. And I remembered his attention to detail. He would sort of say, "Oh, wow. Do you see the shadow on that roof? Wow. Do you see that doorknob? look at that doorknob, look how ornate, you know what I mean? He would just sort of like see the most, and people who knew him, I actually met many years, so after he passed away, I met a woman who was actually his model, where he used to paint. And she was saying, "Oh, I know your dad." I said, "Yeah, everybody knew my dad." "Oh yeah, Seymour. Oh my God, he was such an interesting guy. He was very temperamental." I said, "Yeah, I'd say so." And he said, "When I came to model, my skirt had to be in just the exact same fold, and he would notice that." And that, and so it was really interesting that, he really had that sort of like attention to detail. I remember one time, I guess when I was sort of like exploring Zen Buddhism or something like that in meditation, I was talking to him about it, and he says, when I was sort of explaining, sort of what happens when you sit in Zazen, he was sort of saying, "Oh, I don't need to do that." I was like, "Why not?" He says, "Oh, I do that when I'm painting." So that idea of the sort of like hyper focus and sort of like not thinking about anything but what you are actually doing in the moment.
And did you inherit being temperamental?
I don't know. You tell me. Am I temperamental?
Oh, hey, relax, man. That's a little bit of an attitude you just gave me there. Just calm down.
All right, how was I talking about the sound just about, like a half an hour ago?
That's great. That's great. I want to hear another song, right? So I want to cue that up. I also want to send a shout out to Ralph Monahan for making a very generous donation to us
Ralph! What's
at
up,
Rafters
Ralph?
Tavern. Thank you very much for that.
That's
Again,
awesome.
I will tell you that if you are inclined to make any sort of donations, that you can do so by going to www.venmo, that's venmo.com/Rafters-Tavern. www.venmo.com/Rafters-Tavern. So thank you very much for that. What are you going to play next for us?
What's our time like?
We have less. We have about 20 something minutes.
Okay.
What you got?
Let's do Holes. That'll be fun.
All right, Holes is light and uplifting. I happen to know that song.
See, this would be the time that you could use your
Ooh, wait a second.
See?
Now we have the
Timing is everything. Bruce.
Timing is everything. I don't have much of that. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Holes by Lucas, my Hara Rotman.
And you're going to play some of that box, too?
I will play some of this box. By the way, this box underneath the desk here is called a cajon. It is indeed just a box. So I am playing the box.
And I believe it means box in Spanish, too. So
well, there you go. A box by any other name.
Holes in my pocket, I ain't got a cent. Holes in my wallet, must be where my money went. Holes must be where my money went. Got a whole lot since my baby left. Holes in my sneakers where my toes peek through. Holes in my sneakers from sneaking up on you. Holes in my sneakers, that's where my toes peek through. got a hole in my blanket, got a hole in my bed, hole in my pillow. I got a hole in my spread. I got a whole lot of hole in my life since the day that you left. Holding my shoe, holding my heart, girl, I'm missing you. I got a whole lot of holes, and I got a whole lot of blue.
Is that a true story?
It's a true story.
Especially these days. True story for many.
These days.
Holes in the pockets.
I actually found out where that song came from because I was, pandemic time, and I've been thinking about these ridiculous things. And it came out of working as a third grade teacher. And we were doing a lesson on, was it homophones? I think that's homophones, which are words that are spelled differently, which are spelled differently, but sound the same. And this, we were doing some poetry work, and this kid sort of comes up to me and said, "I got a whole lot of holes." And I was like, "What?" And he sort of showed me his pants, and his pants were like, he said, "See, I got a whole lot of holes." And then he said, "My pockets too." His pocket and his pockets were full of holes.
So you failed him.
No, he got extra credit.
He got extra credit for having a hole. Okay, because you got a song out of
I
it.
got a song out of it.
You got a song out of it. That's great. He gets holes in his pockets. You get a song. Good for you, man. Okay, so in the interest of time, because there's a lot of things that I wanted to ask you, a lot of things that I wanted to get to, but for those of you who do not know Lucas, he's got some absolutely fantastic stories, but I want to make sure that we get to the song. So what are you going to play for us next?
Okay, do we have time for 1, 2 more songs? What do we got?
I think we can do 2, and then I'm going to ask you to tell a story.
Okay.
I hope we have 2.
Uh-oh. Well, then.
So we don't disappoint. Let's say 1, and then maybe we'll sneak in another.
All right. So let's do Where the Day Goes then. So
all right.
We have to do that one.
Absolutely. And Lucas is very kind to play this tune. I think it's one of the greatest songs ever, and it's my favorite song that he does. Where the Day Goes by Lucas Myhara Rotman.
And this is a song, also a Philadelphia song about growing up in inner city Philadelphia during a certain time period, late 60s, early 70s. And it's a shout out to all the fellas that I grew up with.
You know what I noticed is that you pay special care to tune your guitar between every song, which means because you do that I probably play a lot of songs out of tune. That's what I'm thinking.
But Brewster, nobody knows this. Nobody knows because you just got that Brewster.
Well, nobody says it.
Where the Day Goes. Daybreak Street, that's where we meet. Shattered windows in August heat, like Odysseus and his mighty crew. Through the side streets and alleyways we flew. Coins we chased, Franklin's grave, check the old brick wall, hot the metal fence, sweet by hot dog and a chip cherry shake. We're gonna nickel for a dead man anyway. When the day goes and the sidewalk ends, when the night falls on his dead end streets and where thoughts go and our dreams begin, that's when I know we'll meet again. Cops are gone, turn the hydrants on, back to a dark wheel, so-called cars running barefoot, dancing through the flood. We just skin and bones, flesh and blood. Here's a Fu Manchu, lucky Jew, Yakin Killer, Mama do to our fearless leader, name, but what looked on his face was all the dream and the fail. When the day goes and the sidewalk ends, when the night falls on his dead end streets and where thoughts go and our dreams begin, that's when I know we'll meet again one more time. Go. When the day goes and the sidewalk ends and the night falls on the dead end streets and where thoughts go and our dreams begin, that's when I know we'll meet again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's give the applause button one more shot, see if it doesn't sound like popcorn this time.
Sorry, dude. Popcorn.
Popcorn, right?
Popcorn. Sorry.
I love popcorn. So, you get popcorn.
But I did want to give a shout out too to everybody. Rafters Tavern is a really awesome place. Brewster, I know you guys haven't been open for a very long time, but I have to say, in the short time that you have been open, the way you guys, you, Molly, Keith, the amazing staff you have here, the way you guys have been able to create community in such a short amount of time. I mean, I just have to say, I am so pleased to be, even a small part of the musical community that you have here. I mean, that open mic that Elizabeth has every Sunday is just getting bigger and bigger and more popular. And I mean, such amazing.
She still has it every Sunday on
every
Zoom
Sunday.
until we can open again for everybody. But thank you very much. I mean, it was very important to us to build community. And look, everybody met us more than halfway. So we're actually super blessed that everybody came together to help us with this place, and everybody's keeping their fingers crossed that we'll survive, get through this, and be able to all join again and fill this room with people loving music. I have another shout out, Tom Washburn. Tom Washburn in Baltimore, all the way from Baltimore.
Man, Tom.
Very generous donation.
Tom, you're the best.
Thank you very much.
Long time, Tom. It's been a long time.
Once again,
my God, Monahans, awesome.
Once again, they donated to www.venmo.com/Rafters-Tavern. So we'll be here every Saturday.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have 10 minutes left, and I'm torn. I have to ask you a story. because it's one of the most amazing stories I've heard you tell. It was about you in a rainforest getting into a fist fight involving monkeys, and then escaping certain death hidden in a boat. Now, you hear these details, we have to hear this, and then we'll have time for one song to close it out.
Yeah, I don't know that I can tell that story. That was told in a specific kind of, where I told that
story. Are you
story.
saying I can't ask that question? Are you telling me you can't tell that story? When you tell me that story,
I won't tell it very well.
Let me tell you this.
It was a particular environment. We were driving
Well,
back
I understand.
from,
Lucas and I went to Nashville together, specifically to play some gigs, especially the Bluebird Cafe, which, by the way, was the scariest place that I ever played. I don't know about you. But we went down there to play together, and we had a fantastic time. And I took over the wheel. He probably didn't like that I did that, but I took over the wheel to drive us back. And during that ride, he told me the story, and I said, I can't believe you've been sitting on that story and have never told me that. And he was just like, what? What? You can't tell that story here? Is that what you're saying?
It is not a 5-minute story, dude.
Oh my
It's
God.
not a 5-minute story, dude. It's just not. I'm sorry.
This is a nightmare.
It's gotta be.
Don't blame me for these. You can't blame me. And finally, I have a place to put some legitimate sound effects. That deserves 2.
Fair enough.
All right.
Fair enough.
Well, you guys will just have to make up some story in your head involving monkeys, certain death, fistfights in the jungle with Lucas involved. All right.
So I might have some kindergarten families watching too. So.
All right. You got to keep it PG.
Yeah.
All right. Makes sense. All right. What else you got?
So this song is called "Superb Starling," and you can also
another one of my favorites.
Oh, okay.
No, I just want to listen to this one. I'm not going to do anything.
Might be nice to have a little bit of
Well, the thing is, I know that this song has a couple of different time changes and stops and things like that. Okay. So I don't want to mess it up for you.
And would you ever mess up a song of mine? You could never happen. Only improve it. You only improve it.
Yeah.
So this song is called "Superb Starling," which is a bird from East Africa, and my wife and I were involved in some work over in Kenya. And we were working at this place called Red Rose School as a part of Lit World International, which does some really, really cool work at schools around the world. And we were so blessed to be a part of it. We were sort of working with teachers at a school in a place called Kibera, which is a poor but really extremely amazing and vibrant sort of place. And we worked at that school, and we spent and I was just so taken by the children that we met at the Kibera at the Red Rose School. They were they were so much fun. They were just so full of life, energy, and intelligence, and wit and fun. And so they stayed with me, and we spent some time in going to the savannah, the Masai Mara, and when we were there, I was just looking up at a nest with a little baby superb starling. And superb starlings are really beautiful, beautiful birds. They're very different from our starlings. They have these bright colors. And I was just watching this little baby in the nests, and the mother was coming to sort of feed it. And I just sort of thought about how, I don't know, in the end, I thought about how that's kind of like what kids need everywhere, right? Sure. I don't know. I felt like kids everywhere need that sort of safe place to sort of to grow and to become whatever they become. And so that's kind of where this song came from. All right. Sorry, it doesn't have monkeys or fistfights in that story.
Yeah, well, you can always get another version.
Next time. Starling, don't you cry. You'll be soaring by and by from your perch on the baobab tree to the canyons of your dream. take a little time to grow. You can watch the rivers flow. Safe on your branch, taste the sun and the wind. Future may hold what tomorrow will bring. As you take to the sky on your shiny blue wings, sit back and wait for the songs that you'll sing. Sit back and wait for the songs that you'll sing. Mother haunts meadow grass, scouts the hills that couldn't pass, fields, grubs, and rays of sun, bring back to her dearest one. You remember where you've been, once your journey does begin. Safe on your branch, taste the sun and the wind. Future may hold what tomorrow will bring. As you take to the sky, your shiny blue wings, sit back and wait for the songs that you'll sing. Sit back and wait for the songs that you'll sing. Birds, darling, don't you cry. Birds, darling, don't you cry.
Another magical tune. That is also one of my favorites, as I said before. Like, just such amazing songwriting. And I would also like to call out a couple of things. One is a massive thank you to Sandra Carey in Manhattan for your very generous donation. You're crazy. That is fantastic. Thank you so very much for that. I would also like to note that I can see how many people are watching on our little screen there. I see 17 people watching, but only 2 thumbs up, which means the other 15 think it's crap, I think. Do you think what's going on? Or?
Sorry, guys.
Did
my best.
Well, we're doing our best. No, I'm very happy to see all of you there watching, and we will be back. Yes, 1 minute to go. We will be back next Saturday, 8 o'clock, with a guest to be announced. Ooh, a 3rd thumbs up. Look at that. I made oh, they took it back. There's only 2. No, it's back.
Oh, Lord.
All right, good. All right. Thank you, Lucas Maihara. Is that right?
You're doing really well.
I'm doing good with that, Maihara.
Yeah.
Lucas Maihara Rotman, everyone. He's got, I could easily do a whole other show, many other shows with Lucas going. He's got so many things going on. Their time in Haiti, all the work you've done in Haiti, and all your stories and the things that you would like to say around social justice and Buddhism, right? Your studies, all of this kind of stuff. You'll have to wait for another time to hear all those fantastic stories. Maybe by then I can give it to tell the story of monkeys in the jungle and fist fights and keep us all on the edge of our seats. So thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. And signing out, any last words, Lucas?
Thank you, Brewster. Thank you for letting me play today, and it's great to be a part of this amazing community that you guys have established up here. So I'm just so pleased to be a part of it.
Well, we are blessed, and we will end it with one more bout of applause / popcorn. That's great, isn't it?
Oh, Lord.
Thank you, everyone. Until next time. Oh, they are saying some things on here. Great show. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.